The small silver ship cut through Earth's atmosphere like a falling star, its hull glowing red-hot from the friction inside. The beings fought desperately to control their dying vessel. Zara gripped the navigation controls with hands that looked almost human, except for the soft blue glow that pulsed beneath her skin. Her companion Lith worked frantically at the engine controls, her silver hair flying as she moved. "The power cord is failing," Lith shouted over the screaming alarms. "We're going down." Their ship had been on a peaceful mission, quietly observing Earth from orbit. They were explorers, not invaders. Their home planet was slowly dying, and they needed to find new worlds where their people might someday live. Earth looked promising, but they had to study it carefully first. Everything went wrong when a solar flare hit their ship. The electromagnetic pulse fried their main systems, and now they were falling toward the green forest below like a meteor. Zara tried to steer toward a clearing, but the controls barely responded. "Hold on," she yelled as the treetops rushed up to meet them. The crash was violent and sudden. The ship tore through massive pine trees, metal screaming against wood. It bounced once, twice, then slammed into the forest floor with a tremendous crash that echoed through the mountains. Steam hissed from the broken hull, and sparks flew from damaged circuits. For several minutes, nothing moved. Then the emergency hatch opened with a grinding sound, and Zara stumbled out, coughing and bleeding. Her biosuit was torn, revealing the strange beauty of her alien skin, where humans had red blood. Hers was a deep purple that sparkled slightly in the dim forest light. "Lith," she called, turning back to help her friend. Lith emerged slowly, favoring her left arm. It hung at an odd angle, clearly broken. Her face was pale, and the gentle glow that normally radiated from her skin had dimmed to almost nothing. "The ship is finished," Lith said quietly, looking back at their destroyed vessel. "The communication array is gone. The engine core is cracked. We cannot repair this." They stood in the alien forest, to beings from another world, suddenly stranded millions of miles from home. The trees around them were enormous, bigger than anything on their planet. The air smelled different, rich with moisture and the scent of growing things. It was beautiful, but terrifying. "Our people will send a rescue ship," Zara said, trying to sound hopeful. "When we don't report back, they'll come looking." "That could take months," Lith replied. "Maybe longer. We don't even know if our distress beacon is working," as if to emphasize their desperate situation. It began to rain. The water was cold and strange, different from the warm, gentle rains of their homeworld. Their torn biosuits offered little protection, and soon they were both shivering. "We need shelter," Lith said, "and we need to treat these wounds before infection sets in." They began walking through the forest, supporting each other. Every step was painful. Zara's leg throbbed where a piece of metal had cut her during the crash. Lith struggled with her broken arm. Their glowing blood left a faint trail behind them, drops of purple light in the gathering darkness. The forest was full of sounds they didn't recognize. Strange bird calls echoed from the canopy above. Something rustled in the bushes nearby, making them jump. On their world, the wildlife was gentle and peaceful. Here, they had no idea what dangers might be lurking in the shadows. After walking for what felt like hours, they found what looked like an old work area. There were rusted pieces of machinery scattered around, and several large logs that had been cut but never removed. It wasn't much shelter, but it was better than nothing. "This will have to do," Zara said warily. They were both exhausted and growing weaker by the minute. The crash had done more damage than they first realized. Zara could feel her body starting to shut down, a survival response. Her species had developed over millions of years. When badly injured, their bodies would enter a deep hibernation state to preserve life. Sometimes they survived it, sometimes they didn't die. As they stumbled toward what they hoped was safety, disaster struck again. There was a sharp metallic snap, followed by screaming pain. They looked down in horror to see that they had stepped into some kind of trap, a massive metal device with cruel teeth that had clamped down on both their legs. "What is this thing?" Zara gasped, trying to pry at the metal jaws. "Some kind of hunting trap," Lith said through gritted teeth. "Left here and forgotten." The trap was old and rusted. its teeth stained with the blood of countless animals over the years. Now it held to beings from another world, its chain anchored to a log too heavy for them to move in their weakened state. Every movement sent fresh waves of agony through their legs. "We're trapped," Zara whispered, the terrible reality sinking in. They struggled against the metal jaws, but it was no use. The trap was designed to hold creatures much stronger than they were. Their purple blood began to flow more freely, mixing with the rust and creating a toxic reaction that burned their skin as the hours passed. Their bioluminescent glow grew dimmer and dimmer. They could feel their bodies beginning to shut down, entering that dangerous hibernation state. Soon they would either heal or die. There was no middle ground. Dawn came gray and cold. Neither of them had slept. The pain was too intense, and they both knew they were running out of time. Their wounds had become infected, and the toxic reaction with the rusty metal was spreading up their legs like fire. "I don't think we're going to make it," Liz said quietly. Zara squeezed her friend's hand. They had been companions for years, exploring the galaxy together, sharing the wonder of discovering new worlds. Now they would die together on this strange planet, far from home and family. "At least we tried," Zara replied. "At least we saw Earth before the end." They began to share memories of home, speaking in their musical language about the crystal cities that sang in the wind, and the purple oceans that glowed with life. They talked about the people they loved and would never see again. The weight of their failed mission pressed down on them like the gray morning sky. As their voices grew weaker and their light began to fade, they prepared to say goodbye to each other and to life itself. The forest around them was still and quiet, as if even the birds sensed the tragedy unfolding in the old logging site. But just as they were about to close their eyes forever, they heard something that made their hearts race with impossible hope. Footsteps, human footsteps, heavy and deliberate, coming closer through the trees. Someone was walking toward them, and their fate was about to change in ways they never could have imagined. The footsteps stopped just beyond the trees. Zara and Lith held their breath, hearts racing despite their weakened state. After 8 long hours trapped in the cruel metal jaws, they had almost given up hope. Now someone was out there, so close. They could hear the soft crunch of leaves underfoot, but then the footsteps moved away, growing fainter until they disappeared completely. The forest fell silent again, and with it, their hearts sank into despair. "They're gone," Zara whispered, her voice barely audible. "Maybe it's better this way," Lith replied weakly. "We don't know what humans would do to us if they found us like this." The morning sun climbed higher, but its warmth couldn't reach them through the thick canopy of trees. Both aliens were growing colder by the hour. Their biosuits, designed for space travel, were torn and useless. The wounds on their legs had turned a dark purple color, and angry red lines were spreading up toward their bodies. Zara looked at her companion with growing concern. Lith was older, more experienced, and had always been the stronger of the two. But now she looked fragile, her silver hair matted with sweat and her skin losing its natural glow. The infection was spreading faster in her system. "Tell me about the singing gardens again," Zara said softly, trying to distract them both from the pain. Lith managed a weak smile. "The flowers there are as tall as trees, and when the wind blows through them, they create the most beautiful music. Each flower has a different note, and together they play songs that change with the seasons." "I've always wanted to see them," Zara said. "You promised to take me there when we got back home." "I still will," Lith replied, but they both knew it was unlikely now. As the hours dragged on, their situation grew more desperate. The rusty metal of the trap was poisoning their blood, creating a reaction their bodies couldn't fight. Their natural healing abilities, which worked so well on their home planet, seemed useless here on Earth. Lith reached into her torn biosuit with trembling fingers and pulled out a small crystal device, about the size of a human thumb. It pulsed, with a soft blue light, the same color as their blood. "What is that?" Zara asked. "Our mission recorder," Lith explained. "Everything we learned about Earth is stored in here. The atmospheric readings, the ocean samples, the observations of human behavior. If our people are ever going to find a new home, they need this information." She pressed the crystal into Zara's hands. "You're younger, stronger. You have a better chance of surviving until help comes. Don't talk like that, Zara protested. We're both going to make it. But even as she said the words, she could see the truth in Lith's fading eyes. The older alien was dying. Her breathing had become shallow and irregular, and the glow beneath her skin was almost completely gone. Listen to me, Lith said urgently. If humans find you, don't let them take this crystal. Our people have been searching for a new world for generations. Earth might be their only hope. Zara clutched the crystal tightly. Inside this small device was the future of her entire civilization. The weight of that responsibility felt heavier than the metal trap holding her prisoner. Tell me about Vex, Lith said suddenly. Tell me about your bonding ceremony. Zara's eyes filled with tears, clear, like human tears, but with a slight shimmer that caught the light. Vex was her life partner back home, and they had recently bonded with a young offspring. It was the equivalent of adopting a child in human terms, and they had been so excited to start their family. Together, the ceremony was in the Crystal Garden. Zara began, her voice growing stronger as she remembered. Vex wore the traditional blue robes, and we exchanged light patterns, the ones that show our deepest feelings. When our offspring joined the ceremony, their pattern was the brightest gold I'd ever seen. They'll be waiting for you, Lith said. Don't give up. But as the day wore on, giving up seemed like the only option left. Their bodies were shutting down, entering the deep hibernation state that was their species' last defense against death. Once that process began, there was no stopping it. They would either emerge healed or never wake up at all. The forest around them was full of life. Birds sang in the trees above. Squirrels chattered as they gathered nuts for winter. A deer appeared at the edge of the clearing, watched them for a moment with curious eyes, then bounded away. Earth was so vibrant, so alive. It seemed wrong to die in such a beautiful place. I'm scared, Zara admitted as the shadows grew longer. So am I, Lith replied. But we've seen wonders that few of our people ever will. We've traveled between stars and walked on an alien world. We've breathed the air of Earth and felt its rain on our skin. Not many can say that. As evening approached, they began to perform their traditional death ritual. It was something their people had done for thousands of years when facing the end. They joined hands and began to hum softly, a low, musical sound that seemed to blend with the forest around them. The humming grew into whispered words, ancient prayers in their native language, that spoke of journeys ending and new beginnings. They talked about the great cycle of life and death that connected all living things. Whether they were born on distant worlds or right here on Earth, promise me something, Lith said as her voice grew weaker. Anything. If you survive, and I don't, tell our people that Earth is worth saving. Tell them that humans might seem primitive, but they have something we've lost. They still dream of the stars. They still wonder what's out there in the darkness. Zara squeezed her friend's hand. I promise. The light was fading fast now, and with it, their strength. They could feel their bodies beginning the final shutdown, their metabolism slowing to almost nothing. Soon they would be beyond pain, beyond fear, beyond hope. But just as they whispered their final goodbyes to each other and prepared to close their eyes forever, they heard it again. Footsteps. Closer this time, more deliberate. Someone was definitely coming toward them through the trees. Do you hear that? Zara breathed. Lith nodded weakly. Maybe we're dreaming. The footsteps grew louder, accompanied by the sound of branches being pushed aside. Whoever was out there was heading straight for their location. In moments, they would either be saved or face whatever fate awaited them at human hands. Their hearts pounded with a mixture of hope and terror as the footsteps stopped just beyond the trees, where they lay dying. Dr. Rachel Kim pushed through the thick undergrowth, her hiking boots crunching on fallen leaves. She had been walking these forest trails for over 10 years, studying the local wildlife and plant species. As a scientist who specialized in unknown life forms, she spent most of her time alone among the trees, collecting samples and taking notes. Today felt different, though. Yesterday, she had seen what looked like a meteor streaking across the sky, followed by a distant crash that shook the ground beneath her feet. The local news reported it as a small earthquake, but Rachel knew better. She had seen enough falling space rocks to recognize the real thing. Now she was following a faint trail of disturbed earth and broken branches, hoping to find whatever had fallen from the sky. As a researcher, she was always excited by the possibility of discovering something new. But nothing could have prepared her for what she was about to find. The trail led her to an old logging site she had visited many times before. But something was wrong. There were strange purple stains on the ground that seemed to glow faintly in the morning light. She knelt down and touched one of the spots with her gloved finger. It was still wet, and it had an odd shimmer to it unlike anything she had ever seen. Following the glowing trail, she walked deeper into the clearing. That's when she heard it, a soft humming sound, almost like singing, but in no language she recognized. The melody was hauntingly beautiful, yet filled with sadness. Rachel crept forward carefully, her heart pounding with excitement and fear. The singing was coming from behind a pile of old logs near the center of the clearing. She moved around the obstacles and then stopped dead in her tracks. Two figures lay trapped in an old bear trap, their legs caught in the rusty metal jaws. At first glance, they looked human, to women with long hair, wearing what appeared to be some kind of metallic clothing. But as Rachel moved closer, she realized these were no ordinary people. Their skin had a translucent quality that seemed to glow from within. She could actually see their blood flowing through their bodies, but it wasn't red like human blood. It was a deep purple color that pulsed with its own light. Their faces were beautiful but strange, with features that were almost human but not quite right. "Oh my God," Rachel whispered, her scientific mind racing to process what she was seeing. One of the trapped figures opened her eyes and looked directly at Rachel. Those eyes were larger than human eyes, with an iris that shifted between blue and silver. There was intelligence there, and pain, and something that looked almost like hope. Rachel had spent her entire career being laughed at by other scientists. She had written papers about the possibility of life on other planets, only to be told she was wasting her time with fantasy. Now, faced with proof that she had been right all along, she felt her worldview completely change. "Don't be afraid," she said softly, not sure if they could understand her. "I'm going to help you." She approached slowly, her hands raised to show she meant no harm. The conscious alien watched her every move, while her companion remained still, barely breathing. Rachel could see that both of them were badly injured and growing weaker by the minute. The bear trap was old and crusted with rust. It had been abandoned here years ago by some hunter who never bothered to remove it. Now it held to beings from another world, its metal teeth buried deep in their legs. The purple blood that seeped from their wounds was reacting with the rusty metal in a way that looked toxic. Rachel had some experience with animal rescue from her field work. She knew she had to get them out of that trap quickly or they would die. But first, she needed to find a way to communicate. She pointed to herself and said clearly, "Rachel." "My name is Rachel." The conscious alien looked confused for a moment, then seemed to understand. She pointed to herself with a trembling hand and made a sound that was like music, "Zara." Then she pointed to her unconscious companion and said something that sounded like Lith. "Zara and Lith," Rachel repeated, and saw a flicker of what might have been a smile cross the alien's face. Now came the hard part. Rachel examined the bear trap carefully. It was designed to hold animals much larger and stronger than these delicate beings. The mechanism was simple but effective, a spring-loaded jaw that could only be opened by pressing down on the sides while pulling the jaws apart. She looked around the clearing until she found a sturdy branch that could serve as a lever. The work was slow and difficult. The trap was old and the metal had seized up from years of weather and rust, but gradually, with Rachel pushing down on one side and using the branch to pry at the other, the jaws began to open. "Hold on," she told Zara, who was watching with growing amazement. "Almost got it." When the trap finally released, both aliens collapsed completely. Their legs were mangled and bleeding that strange purple blood. Rachel could see that the wounds were infected and spreading. Without immediate medical attention, they would die within hours. But here was her dilemma. If she took them to a hospital, they would become instant celebrities and likely prisoners. The government would want to study them, maybe even experiment on them. The media would turn it into a circus. These peaceful beings would never have a moment's peace again. On the other hand, if she tried to help them herself, she might not be able to save them. She was a field biologist, not a doctor, and if they died under her care, she would lose the greatest discovery in human history. Rachel looked at Zara's trusting eyes and made her decision. She couldn't let these beings become lab specimens. They were intelligent, peaceful creatures who deserved better than that fate. "I'm going to take you somewhere safe," she told them. Not sure if they understood, but hoping her tone conveyed her intentions, using her emergency blanket, she carefully covered both aliens to hide their otherworldly appearance. Then she radioed for her research vehicle, telling her assistant she had found some injured hikers and needed transportation. As she waited for help to arrive, Rachel sat with the two beings from another world and tried to process what this meant. Everything she had believed about life in the universe had just been proven correct. But more than that, she had been chosen to be the first human to make contact with another intelligent species. The weight of that responsibility was overwhelming. What she did in the next few hours could determine the future relationship between two worlds. She looked down at Zara, who was still conscious but fading fast, and promised silently that she would do everything in her power to keep these remarkable beings safe. The sound of her vehicle approaching through the trees meant that the next phase of this incredible encounter was about to begin. Rachel's research cabin sat deep in the mountains, 3 miles from the nearest road. She had built it herself over several summers, creating the perfect place to study wildlife without disturbing their natural behavior. Now it would serve as a secret hospital for beings from another world. Her assistant Tom helped carry the covered stretchers into the cabin, asking no questions. He had worked with Rachel long enough to trust her judgment, even when she made unusual requests. After he left, promising to bring medical supplies in the morning, Rachel was alone with her extraordinary patients. The cabin's main room doubled as her laboratory. Filled with scientific equipment she used for her research, she cleared everything off her main work table and carefully moved Zara onto it. Lith remained unconscious on the couch nearby, her breathing so shallow that Rachel had to check several times to make sure she was still alive. "This is going to hurt," Rachel told Zara as she began cleaning the wounds on her legs. To her surprise, Zara reached out and touched Rachel's arm. Suddenly, Rachel's mind filled with images and feelings that weren't her own. She saw flashing pictures of a beautiful world with crystal cities and purple oceans. She felt Zara's gratitude and trust, along with her fear for her friend's life. Rachel jerked her hand away, startled. What just happened? Zara looked at her with those large, shifting eyes and touched her own head, then pointed to Rachel's. Somehow, she had shared her thoughts directly with the human woman. It was like nothing Rachel had ever experienced. "You can read minds?" Rachel asked. Fascinated despite her shock, Zara seemed to understand the question. She shook her head and made a gesture that suggested it was more like sharing than reading. Then she pointed to her injured friend and made sounds that clearly meant she was worried. Rachel turned her attention to Lith, whose condition was getting worse by the hour. The infection from the rusty trap was spreading up both aliens' legs, and their natural glow was fading fast. Rachel had no idea how to treat alien biology, but she had to try something. She remembered reading about how certain types of light could help with healing in some Earth animals. Her photography equipment included several UV lamps that she used for documenting nocturnal creatures. Maybe they would help, setting up the lights around both patients. Rachel turned them on and watched anxiously. At first, nothing happened. Then slowly, the aliens' wounds began to respond. The purple blood seemed to react to the UV light, becoming brighter and more active. The infected areas started to look less angry and swollen. "It's working," Rachel whispered in amazement. Over the next few hours, she watched as the light therapy began to heal the aliens in ways that seemed impossible. Their cuts started closing on their own, and the toxic reaction from the rust began to fade. Most importantly, Lith's breathing became stronger and more regular. As Zara regained some strength, She tried again to communicate through touch. This time, Rachel was ready for it. She let the mental connection form, and suddenly she could understand what Zara was trying to tell her. The images that flowed between them were incredible. Rachel saw Zara's home planet dying as its sun grew old and unstable. She saw fleets of small ships like the one that had crashed, sent out to explore the galaxy for new worlds, where their people might survive. She felt Zara's love for her family back home and her dedication to the mission that had brought her to Earth. In return, Rachel shared her own memories. Her childhood spent stargazing and dreaming of life among the stars. Her struggles as a scientist trying to prove that humans weren't alone in the universe. Her loneliness as someone who spent most of her time in the wilderness, studying creatures that couldn't talk back. The connection between them grew stronger over the following days. Rachel learned that Zara's people were peaceful explorers, not conquerors. They had been watching Earth for years, trying to determine if humans were ready for contact. The crash had been an accident. They were supposed to observe from a distance and report back. Your people are looking for a new home, Rachel said during one of their mental conversations. Zara nodded sadly, sharing images of their dying world. The sun was becoming unstable, creating massive solar storms that were slowly destroying their planet's atmosphere. They had maybe 50 years before it became completely uninhabitable. Why Earth? Rachel asked. The answer came in a flood of scientific data that made Rachel's head spin. Earth's atmosphere, gravity, and distance from the sun were almost perfect for Zara's people. The oceans could be adapted to support their aquatic food sources. Most importantly, Earth was far enough from their dying sun to be safe. But there was a problem. Zara's people were afraid of humans. They had observed human history, the wars, the violence, the tendency to fear and attack anything different. Making contact too soon could lead to disaster for both species. We're not all like that, Rachel protested. Through their mental link, Zara showed her what her people had learned about humans. They had seen the good and the bad, the wars and the art, the cruelty and the kindness, the fear and the curiosity. They knew humans were capable of great things, but also terrible ones. On the third day, Lith finally woke up. At first, she was suspicious of Rachel communicating with Zara in their musical language. But gradually, as she learned what the human woman had done to save them, her attitude changed. The three of them spent hours by the fireplace, with Zara translating between Rachel and Lith. They shared stories about their different worlds, comparing the similarities and differences between their species. Rachel learned that both aliens were scientists like herself, sent to study Earth's environment and its inhabitants. We're not so different, Rachel realized. We're all just trying to understand the universe around us. Liz shared something that surprised Rachel. Her people had been sending out explorer ships for over 1,000 years, searching for new worlds. Earth was the first planet they had found that could truly support life as they knew it. If they couldn't find a way to live here peacefully, their entire civilization might disappear forever. The weight of that responsibility was overwhelming. Rachel found herself in an impossible position. She was probably the only human who knew that an entire alien civilization was depending on Earth for survival. But she was also aware that revealing this information too quickly could cause panic and violence. What do we do now? She asked. The answer would determine the future of two worlds, and it was a decision that would change all their lives forever. As they sat together in the warm glow of a fireplace, three beings from different worlds bound together by circumstances beyond their control, they began to plan for a future that none of them could have imagined just a few days before. 2 weeks had passed since the crash, and Rachel's cabin had become an unlikely home for three very different beings. The aliens were much stronger now, able to walk around and help with daily tasks. Their wounds had healed completely, leaving only faint silver scars that caught the light when they moved. Rachel had learned so much about their world during this time. Through their mental connections, she had seen their crystal cities that sang in the wind, their floating gardens that grew food in the air, and their peaceful way of life that had existed for thousands of years without war or conflict. But she had also learned something that kept her awake at night. Their rescue ship was coming. How long? Rachel asked as they sat around the fireplace on a cold autumn evening. Zara closed her eyes and concentrated, reaching out with her mind across the vast distance of space. 6 days, she said quietly. Maybe 7. The news hit Rachel like a physical blow. She had known this moment would come, but she wasn't prepared for how much it would hurt over these 2 weeks. She had grown closer to these two beings than she had to any human in years. They understood her love of science, her curiosity about the universe, and her loneliness in ways that no one else ever had. "We don't want to leave you either," Liz said, sensing Rachel's sadness through their shared connection. Through the mental link they now all shared, Rachel could feel their conflict. They missed their home desperately, their families, their way of life, the beautiful world they might never see again. But they had also grown to love Earth and the human woman who had saved their lives. "There's something we need to tell you," Zara said, her musical voice heavy with emotion. "Something about why we're really here." Over the next hour, they shared information that changed everything Rachel thought she knew about their mission. Yes, they were explorers looking for a new home, but they were also part of a much larger plan. Their people had been studying Earth for over 50 years, sending small observation ships to learn about human behavior and capabilities. What they had discovered both impressed and frightened them. Humans were incredibly creative and adaptable, but also quick to violence when faced with the unknown. "We've seen your movies," Lith explained with what might have been a smile. "Humans always shoot first when they meet aliens." But Rachel was different. Through her, they had learned that not all humans were driven by fear. Some were motivated by curiosity and compassion. Some could look at a being from another world and see, not a threat, but a friend. "That's why this moment is so important," Zara continued. "You're going to be the bridge between our worlds." They explained their plan. When their rescue ship arrived, they would return home with vital information about Earth and its people. But more importantly, they would carry back the story of Rachel, a human who had chosen to help rather than harm, to protect rather than exploit. "Your leaders will want to study us," Liz said. "Lock us away, run tests, treat us like specimens. But you chose to heal us instead. That gives us hope that peaceful contact might be possible someday." Rachel felt the weight of responsibilities settling on her shoulders. She was being asked to represent all of humanity to an advanced alien civilization. The future relationship between two worlds might depend on what she did next. "They want you to come with us," Zara said suddenly. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Rachel could feel both aliens holding their breath, waiting for her response. "Come with you?" Rachel repeated, not sure she had understood correctly. Through their mental connection, she saw what they were offering, a chance to see their world before it died, to study alien life forms that no human had ever imagined, to be part of the greatest adventure in human history. But she would have to leave everything behind. Her research, her life on Earth, everyone she had ever known. She would become the first human ambassador to an alien world, but she might never come home again. "I can't," Rachel said, the words feeling like stones in her throat. "This is my world. These are my people. If I'm going to help build a bridge between our species, I need to do it from here." She could feel their disappointment, but also their understanding. They had hoped she would come with them, but they respected her choice. "Then we need to find another way to stay in contact." Liz said practically. They spent the next few days working on a solution. Using parts from their crashed ship and some of Rachel's communication equipment, they built a device that could send messages across the vast distances between worlds. It wasn't perfect. Messages would take months to travel between Earth and their home planet, but it was a start. Rachel also helped them gather samples from Earth to take back with them, seeds from native plants, water from mountain streams, soil from different regions. If their people were ever going to make Earth their new home, they needed to understand how to live alongside existing life forms rather than replace them. On their last night together, they sat under the stars and shared their hopes for the future. Rachel promised to spend her life preparing humanity for eventual contact. She would publish papers about the possibility of peaceful coexistence with alien species. She would work to change attitudes and reduce fear. It might take generations. She admitted. Humans change slowly. We have time, Zara replied. Our world won't die tomorrow. And now we know there are humans like you who can help us find a peaceful path forward. The rescue ship arrived. Just before dawn, a sleek vessel that appeared silently above the forest canopy. Rachel watched from her cabin window as her friends prepared to leave. Their biosuits repaired and their mission data safely stored in the crystal device. They had protected so carefully. Will I ever see you again? Rachel asked as they said goodbye. When the time is right, Lith replied. When both our peoples are ready for the truth. They shared one final mental connection. All three minds joined together across the barriers of species and world. Rachel felt their love and gratitude, their hope for the future, and their promise that this was not really goodbye. As the alien ship disappeared into the morning sky, Rachel stood alone in her cabin, forever changed by her encounter with beings from another world. In her pocket was the communication device they had built together. In her garden grew a single alien flower that bloomed with soft purple light, the first extraterrestrial life to take root on Earth. She had become the guardian of the greatest secret in human history and the bridge between two worlds that might someday share the same sky. The real adventure was just beginning.